Hello? 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 My name is Judy, and I'm a very grateful member of the Al-Anon family group. And I'm very nervous, but I know that they'll pass as long as I just keep talking. And I started out qualifying for Al-Anon very early. I was brought up in an alcoholic home. My mother taught me real well what to do because I was her partner in finding Daddy's bottle and emptying it. And so we went on this search for Old Crow, and we'd find one behind a seat in the truck or in the garage or out in the barn or underneath a cushion in a chair. But that was our mission, to find that bottle and empty it. And so then we'd both look out the blinds waiting for Daddy to come home, and his condition when he came home determined what was going to go on from there. If he came in drunk, the squabble was on. And my mother was a rager. And I remember very specifically that my older brother was 7 years older than I. So he became my hero. So he would rescue me when the fight went on and just keep me real close to him. If it was in the middle of the night, I'd crawl up in bed with my brother, and I felt safe. And the bedrooms were really crazy because in that house, my bedroom was on the front of the house, and then Mother and Daddy's bedroom was in the middle. And the bathroom was over here behind everybody in the hall that came from the kitchen. And my brother had a little bitty room on the other side. So that was a long trek to get to my brother. But he was my hero, and he made me feel safe. Well, when I was 10, I'll be dadgum if he didn't leave home. He was old enough to leave home, and of course he wanted to escape that situation, so he joined the Army, and off he went. Well, then the disease progressed, as the disease does, and things didn't get better at my house. I remember one time Daddy threw his boot into one of the end tables at the house, and it shattered. And so that was my first experience with flying shoes. And that will become real relevant later in my story. But things didn't get better. And I don't know in the way that dysfunctional families go, I think I qualified in several little categories. Number one was the lost child. It was between the lost child and what's the one that does the play acting and keeps everybody entertained? It was Scapegoat. That was in between the two. And I carried that with me for the rest of my life. So, of course, I was always attracted to the boys that were the baddest boys and the ones that drank and the ones that I thought that I could fix. And so that just kind of just went on and on and on and on and on. The boy I felt my high school sweetheart had an alcoholic daddy that was friends with my alcoholic daddy. And so, of course, he was tall and handsome, and I'd be dadgum if I just didn't fall for him, and he didn't just fall for me. And here we went. The funny part of that story is years later, when we got in recovery, he was in one of the first meetings we went to in Amarillo. And there he was in recovery. And he'd been in recovery for 7 years. And I was really grateful to see him there because I knew he belonged. And we're still friends today. And we meet up in class reunions, and maybe we'll meet up in some, he's moved off to New Mexico now, but we'll meet again, I know that. And that's just a real sweet experience to see people you love that make it into recovery, because I know that's where the answers are. It's where they've been for me. But rocking right along, like I said, my disease did not progress, just like it talks about. And so here we went. And Barry, when we graduated from high school, my high school sweetheart, well, he joined the military too, so he went in the Navy. And then I was dating college boys at that time. And, of course, I was an art major, and so the ones in the art department that did all the funny things were my buddies. And I got hooked up with this a guy named Jerry Don, and he smoked a pipe, and he had a cape, and he had a goatee, and I thought he was just it. And so he'd come to pick me up at my house, and my daddy met him at the door with a shotgun. Because I don't know about you girls, but my daddy was real particular about the boys I went with. He didn't like any of them. But I went off with Jerry Don. And I moved out of my house and went to the dorm. Now, I lived in Canyon, Texas, so I was a resident of Canyon, Texas, and I went to West Texas State University. So I went and lived in the dorm so that I could go with Jerry Don. I had to pay to live in the dorm, which was really a deal. I whined and got my way, and here we went. So I lived in the dorm for about a year, and I decided it was a little too costly to move back home. But I lived at home until I was 22 years old, because I was going to school and working full-time, and I stayed at home. Well, when I married a local boy, when I started dating a local boy that my mother and daddy knew their parents, it got real comfortable. It was a real comfortable deal. And Stephen had gotten out of the Marine Corps, and I was working at a little soda shop. It used to be like a Dairy Queen, but it was privately owned, and they'd changed it to the Dairy Freeze or something. And this little woman about this tall that smoked cigarettes constantly ran the place, and she was always dropping ashes on everything. You might get ashes in your hamburger. But I was standing on the Coke machine, trying to fill the Coke machine, and I had on a mini skirt when this GT pulled up at the window, and boy, I wanted to go see who was in that GT. So I went over and I threw my head out, and this little voice on the passenger side, it wasn't that good-looking driver, but this little voice on the passenger side said, "Hey, aren't you that ugly little Judy Byers?" And I went, "Excuse me?" And he says, "I'm Stephen." His last name was something else. And he said, "Would you like to go out with me?" And I said, "Well, I might think about it." And so he gave me a call, and we started dating, and that's the man I married 4 years later. And he's the husband. He's my children's daddy. And he was an ex-Marine. He never recovered from being a sergeant. Ever. So it was on. I was going to beat him to death one time with an Afghan. And that's where I developed my ability to throw my shoes. Because I remember Daddy throwing that boot. That was real effective. So when you wore high heels and you sailed them across the room, you got people's attention pretty damn quick. To say I didn't know how to handle my anger well. But what I would do is I'd stuff it. I would stuff that anger until my slush bucket got so full that it would just erupt at the very slightest provocation. I remember things like the vacuum cleaner stopping up, and I'd be in the middle of the floor screaming and pounding on the vacuum cleaner hose. And I just did ridiculous things. Threw dishes. I like to hear them break. Go tell you, but when somebody gave me permission to go beat up on a tree with a bat, I took advantage of that. I always considered myself a pretty religious person. I was brought up in the Baptist church. I'm a recovering Baptist. And, I got baptized several times trying to fix me in several different churches. I was baptized, I was sprinkled, I had hands laid on. I had a great uncle that was a preacher in one of those funny churches where they put hands on you, and so I got that done quite regular. And I never developed a relationship with my higher power like I have in recovery. That's been a real precious gift that this business has given me. But I hadn't got there yet in my story, have I? So back to that. Steve and I were married for 18 years. And I kind of resumed my my little position as the lost child or the scapegoat. And Stephen was a workaholic. He worked all the time. He was never home. And when he was home, the kids and I just really would rather he not be, because he stomped when he walked, and he was aggressive when he talked, and he was just not pleasant to be with. He was acting like he was mad all the time. So we usually got into it, and that wasn't pretty either. But I would find myself in bouts of depression where I would sleep like for 12 hours, go lock myself up in the bedroom and sleep for 12 hours, which was not being a good mom to those 3 little kids. My oldest daughter became the one that took care of everybody. And my youngest daughter was 8 when we divorced. And my kids were like less than 2 years apart. So Darby was the youngest, and then Michael Derrick was the middle. He's the middle boy, and then Jana was the oldest. She was born in 74. He was born in 76, and she was born in 77. So in 88, that Marine of mine asked me to leave. He'd had all of me he could stand, and he asked me to leave. And so I got a teaching job in Bledsoe, Texas. Y'all know where Bledsoe is because y'all live here in the Panhandle. Nobody down in Whitney ever knew where Bledsoe was. What? But it's a little blink in the road, and they paid real well for an educator. They paid $2,500 above base and provided my housing. So being a newly divorced person, that really worked for me. And so off we went to Bledsoe. They furnished a really nice little 3-bedroom, brand new trailer house. They built a big old porch on it with steps, and they spoiled me rotten and let me teach the way I needed to teach, and I had a blast in Bledsoe. That was the only assignment I ever had where I really felt like I did some quality teaching. And because I got to play, and it was very healing for me to play and love those kids and sing to those kids and dance with those kids. It was a precious, precious assignment. I taught kindergarten half a day and art half a day, which were my loves. And teaching never was the same after Bledsoe closed down. I never liked it after that. But here I was in Bledsoe, Texas, and I was divorced, and I went to the Patch in Levelland, Texas. One of the girls I worked with, her husband was on the school board, and she was my hairdresser, and she'd given me a haircut before school started. And in September of 88, she asked me if I wanted to go twist off with her. And I said, yeah, I haven't been dancing in a long time. I like to go. So we went to this honky-tonk in Levelland, Texas called The Patch. And she said, see that cowboy over there with the white hat? You need to meet him. He had a white hat and a white shirt. I mean, he really looked sharp. Big old long legs. He was pretty. Had a dark beard. And I was on the dance floor with somebody else, and when I came, he was sitting at the table. And I knocked a drink in his lap, got a towel, wiped it off, and he was hooked from there. But we danced together, and we danced like Fred and Ginger, and then the love affair was on, and he started coming to get me. He gave me a ride to Bledsoe that night, and it was raining. And I kept trying to cover up one of his eyes so he could see better. It was crazy from the beginning. And he was a real gentleman, and he walked me to the door and opened the door and said goodnight, and that was the end of that. And then pretty soon he called me and asked me for a date. A very nice gentleman. He walked me to the door that night and kissed me goodnight. Took things real slow and real nice and real easy. And he was fun to be with. He's a fun guy to be with. We have laughed for 30 years now. So it was on. But the deal is he had 3 kids and I had 3 kids from divorce. And we shuffled those kids back and forth trying to fix everybody and get everybody happy. You know, that was my job, is to be the peacemaker. I don't know about you other Al-Anon ladies, but I was going to fix everybody where it was going to be peaceful in my house. I never got it to work. Nothing I did worked. I made lists and gave assignments, and people had to sign contracts. They didn't give a heck about that. Kept me real busy. I tell you what. We found recovery in 1991, and I had been to Al-Anon before, but I'd never been to Al-Anon with my rear on fire like I was at that point in my life. And that middle boy of mine got in trouble with the law, and his getting in trouble with the law was behind stealing drugs, stealing a gun out of a patrolman's car, which was all drug related. And he had just turned 17, and they had just made 17 to be prosecuted as an adult. So he went to the pen, and then he escaped from the pen. When he got up on work release, he ran. And I mean, it was on. I was crazy woman, crazy woman. And if it hadn't been for the women in Al-Anon, I could not have made it, because, you know, some of those gals had some of the same experience I had. And they held my hand and taught me through it. They said this, and it assured me over and over and over again that this was not my fault, because that's exactly where I was going. If I had just said the right thing or done the right thing or been there at the right time for that boy, this would not have happened. So I assumed all of that guilt. And I tried to beat myself to death with it. And I was loved right straight through it by women that had had similar experiences. And that's when I fell in love with Al-Anon and knew that that's where I needed to be. Because I need to be there for other women that have had the same experience. And I can remember one of my very first meetings, someone was talking about wanting to kill their husband. I went, oh, thank God I'm not the only one. Was plotting their demise. And because I felt guilty about that. I had those feelings that it would be easier just to kill them and get away with it than it would be to divorce them. I lost a lot with that first divorce. Lost a house, my possessions, because I didn't fight for it. I don't know a lot of that. I said it was because I didn't want to drag the kids. If you'd asked me, I'd say it's because I didn't want to drag the kids through it. But I was really not wanting him to air my dirty laundry, because I was ashamed. And that was another big element there. So I didn't fight for custody of my kids. I did get joint custody. And so they came to see me in Bledsoe every other week. And Bud's son would come and see us every other week or whenever he wanted to come see us. And so we had a house full of kids all the time, and it was chaos. And in recovery, it got a little bit better for us. We were having one of those screaming matches with the boys one time, and they were F you, F you, F you. This is all your fault, F you, F you. And Bud and I were just sitting there just real calm, and we didn't engage, and we let them have their say, like, we're sorry you feel that way. And both of us were just kind of, man, how did this happen? I think we must have prayed before we did this, because neither one of us lost it. You know, we gave them you have chosen by your actions to leave, so you have to leave. You know, and so we were getting some outside help too. And my counselor ended up being a woman that's with an Al-Anon. And so that worked out real well. Real well. Well, we decided to make a geographical cure in 1997. And we flew off to Bledsoe. Had been out of a job, and I went looking. My sponsor, Rosemary and Stan were our sponsors, and they were also our Unity ministers. And they got an assignment at the Chapel of Light in Whitney, Texas. So I went down there, drove a car for them, and I was just going to drive that car and say my final goodbyes to them and let go, because I'd always had them right there for me, you know. So I went and did that, and when we got to Whitney, she said, Judy, you don't have a job. Why don't you call around here and see if you can get a job? Well, I got a job in Copperell in second grade. I could do that. So here I went, and that was in January. I started that teaching job, and so I went home, started packing, came back up. And pretty soon, here came Bud, and we had a house. We were in Whitney by God, Texas. And they consider themselves in Whitney to be the AA capital of the world. And it's not disputable. It's a lovely group, and it's a very big group for such a small community. So, and it was mostly, guess what? Couples in recovery, which was just exactly divinely what we needed. It was a divine assignment because it was what we needed to learn how to be a functioning, God-fearing, sober couple. So it's been a really sweet experience. We had a really sweet experience in Whitney. And, our kids got grown up and went off. They were all a little bit off because they're our kids. They got grown up and moved off. And so it became just Bud and I. And we had 3 lots, 2 houses, and a lot of maintenance. And then when Bud got diagnosed with his disease, that was a whole another thing that we could not have walked through without our recovery, without the people in AA for us and the people in Al-Anon for us. And the couples that had had the same experiences, his sponsor had the same experience with his wife, and who is a phenomenal Al-Anon. And so we had a lot of people sharing their experience, strength, and hope with us and being there for when we needed them. And it was perfect. And we got through Bud's illness, and then that was 7 years ago, wasn't it? And accepted the fact that he's going to be himself, whether he's in a wheelchair or not. So it didn't take him too long to get his joy back, and that was the thing that I feared the most, that I was going to lose that joyful spirit that I had married in the beginning, and he'd just be an invalid. Oh, poor me. And I'd have such a burden. I hadn't been that way at all, so I'm really grateful that it hadn't been that way at all, because I can get really hooked up into the self-pity thing. I don't know about y'all. But it's been a real sweet experience to watch him be brave and count on the God of his understanding and report in with his sponsor and to do the right thing for himself medically. But I had to learn to let the frig go and not hover and not interfere with when he was taking his medications, what medications he was taking, and how often he took them. I left that alone. But it took some help. I still have a tendency to kind of hover, and that makes him nervous, so he just goes outside in the shop. And but we have a really, really sweet recovering relationship. And our youngest daughter lives in Fort Worth, and she got real mad when we moved back to Levelland because it was closer when we were in Whitney. We have a son that's retired from the Navy, our middle boy, and he's all over the place, but he has a girlfriend in Morton, so we get to see him kind of often. And that looks like it might get to be a permanent situation. We don't know yet. And our youngest boy just moved from Colorado back to Texas. He's in Bandera now, and he has 2 lovely daughters. And he has the baby. Her name is Porter, and she's 5, and she might show up in these rooms. She is mine. She's a case. She's an entertainer. She's precious. But we have, and let's see, Tommy has girl Macy that's just turned 14, and Darby, my youngest daughter, has a 14-year-old daughter, so we have lots of daughters. And our oldest grandson is off to college, and my oldest granddaughter, Harlow, is off to college, and she's a musician, and a lovely. I don't say our grandkids. And it's so nice to be recovering grandparents because they like to come to our house. It's peaceful and fun. And Nanny has a great big huge purple room for the girls, and my art stuff is all set up in there so we can always craft and paint and do some wonderful things. So it's a precious thing. Now, this year I've had medical issues, and it was just because I was looking for a doctor because I had moved, And I went to one doctor, and he was gynecologist, because I just wanted a regular doctor, and she said, because you have these issues, why don't I just send you over here, because that's what they're going to do first. So they sent me over there, and then he ended up sending me to an oncologist in Lubbock. And I had a uterine cancer, and I just had major surgery, and they got all that stuff out of me, because so there's nothing in there left to be sick. And I had my first chemo treatment yesterday, and I'm real grateful that they got me in there real quick and took very quick action, because I didn't have time to mind play with it. And that's a good thing for me, because if things happen fast, I can't try to manipulate it. So that's very true. So here I am, and I didn't know if I'd be able to even do this. And I'm real grateful I have a podium to kind of lean on. It's a little shaky. That makes it more exciting, doesn't it? That's the way we like it. But I have been in a lot of fear, and I was really in a whole lot of fear before I went with my buddies to Fort Davis. And we do that. That's one of the things we always loved doing when we were in this area, is we always try to go to Fort Davis for the spring fling and the fall ball. One of the two, one or both, because it's such a blast. Go if you have the chance. And we went this year, and I was really in a pity pot and thinking I was probably going to just flake any minute, and didn't want to die, and I didn't know that I was not letting the God of my understanding take care of stuff. And so off we went to Fort Davis, and Robin, in her knowingness, went and found me this woman that she knew was a cancer survivor. And she was from Odessa, and she talked to me and shared her experience, strength, and hope. And she had went through a whole year's worth of chemo and radiation, and survived it. And that's exactly what I needed to hear. The big deal for me was when they first got through with the surgery, it looked like I was going to escape having to do the chemo and radiation, but I didn't. And I know that my doctor made this decision because of the aggressiveness of the kind of cancer that I had. So I'm going to trust that she knows what she's doing. She's very meticulous and very orderly, which I like. Her paperwork even has to be in the right order when you hand it back. I'm serious. She's one of us. And I like that about her. I want my doctor to be that way. So this has been a real pleasure for me, and it's without the program of Al-Anon, I could have not learned how to have relationships with my kids that were functional, or with my mate, or with my brother. My brother was the perfect child. He still is. I told him that one time, and he said, I wish my family thought that. He met his little wife, and she was real God-fearing, and she said, you can't be with me if you're going to drink. So he just never drank again. And he writes. He's a published author, and he retired from Sandia. He was an electronics engineer. So he always did perfect. Stayed married to the same person all his life. I was a serial marrier. That's it. He didn't. He told me after I got my first divorce, he says, sis, you're going to go to hell. I said, I've been in hell. What are you talking about? I just got out. So he didn't get it. He didn't get it. He still doesn't get it. He thinks I could find everything I needed to find in the Bible when I'm thumping on that big book. I was going to share that. You remember, we were talking about Evelyn Koger the other day, and she tells the story about when they first started the auxiliary. All they had was the big book, and they'd go in that room and say how if those husbands would work those steps, everything would be all right. That's what he needs. And I've heard that so much with girls that I work with. And so it would be like he. I said, we're talking about you, but he. You know, and I get it because I was there. Dadgummit, makes me see how really sick I was. And I still sometimes can be. This has been a real pleasure, and thank you very much for listening to me. I never know what I'm going to say. I just pray first and muddle through. But I'm real grateful to be able to be here. I see faces that I've loved and I've known since I first stepped into the rooms of recovery. And I'm real grateful for the women that were there for me when I needed them. And I want to pass it on. Thanks. I'm still hooked up. Yeah. A wreck.
You know how to make an exit.
I do that.